The Red Sea, huh? It seems like every time you turn around, there's another headline,
Yeah, for sure.
another development in the Houthi situation. And now former President Trump is, he's involved again. So
Oh, yeah.
it's definitely back in the spotlight, big time.
Huge.
And for anyone listening, especially if you're prepping for the UPSC mains and prelims,
Yeah.
this is like a textbook example, right, of the kind of
Textbook.
the kind of global security situation
Absolutely.
that's unfolding right now and is so important to understand.
Yeah.
We're going to take a deep dive into all of this today. We'll be looking closely at a recent analysis from the Indian Express. That's going to be our main source.
That's a good one.
So to kick things off, can you give us a little bit of context, for people who may not be following this as closely?
Of course. So this isn't something that just happened overnight, right? We've been seeing this build up for a while now. The Houthis in the Red Sea, it's all connected to that, to the Gaza conflict. And especially since things really escalated there late last year, we've seen just a constant wave of attacks. And they're really messing things up when it comes to global shipping.
Yeah, it's a huge deal for global trade, right?
It is. I mean, think about it. Ships are being forced to completely reroute. They have to go all the way around the Cape of Good Hope.
Wow.
Which obviously means, insurance costs go through the roof, and it just creates all kinds of chaos for the flow of international trade.
So basically what we're going to try to do today
Right.
is to figure out, well, what's Trump doing here? What's his game plan with with all of this attention and action he's focusing on the Houthis? What are his goals? What are the bigger implications? Not just for the region, but for the whole world, really.
Absolutely. We'll try to give you a clear picture of what we know and
Right.
and pinpoint some of the key takeaways. That'll help you make sense of it all.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Trump's been pretty vocal lately.
You're very.
He's been using that Truth Social platform of his to really put out a strong message.
Yeah, strong message.
Not just to the Houthis themselves, but also to Iran.
Yeah, he's basically saying, look, if the Houthis attack, we're going to consider that an attack from Iran.
Right.
Straight up.
Which is a pretty strong statement.
It is. He's not messing around with the wording there.
And it's not just talk, is it? I mean, the U.S. has already launched, over 40 precision strikes? That's what the Indian Express is reporting.
Yep, over 40.
On Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen, places like Sana'a, Sadr, and that key port, Hodeidah.
Right, all targeting those Iranian-backed militants.
And, of course, the Houthis have, responded.
They've definitely escalated their rhetoric. They're making threats. They're even claiming they've launched missile strikes of their own aimed at U.S. warships in the Red Sea.
So the situation is
tense.
Yeah, very tense.
Very reactive. It feels like anything could happen.
And all of this really underscores, that we're not just talking about some isolated incident here, right? There's a long history of U.S. involvement with the Houthis, right? And how they've dealt with it has really varied depending on who's in the White House, right?
Absolutely. U.S. policy has shifted over time.
So can you kind of walk us through some of that history?
Sure. So let's start with the Biden administration, right? Back in 2024, they designated the Houthis as specially designated global terrorists.
Okay.
Big deal, right? But here's the thing. They didn't actually reinstate them as a foreign terrorist organization, an FTO.
Ah, so that's an important distinction then.
It is. There's a difference there. And we also saw the launch of Operation Prosperity Guardian in late 2023.
Operation Prosperity Guardian. Okay.
Which was, it's a multinational effort led by the U.S. Navy to protect shipping in the Red Sea. So they were responding to that very real threat.
Got it. So that was Biden's approach. What about the Trump administration? What did they do differently?
Well, under Trump, during his first term in 2021, he did designate the Houthis as an FTO.
Okay.
And then the Indian Express also mentions a redesignation in 2025, which suggests, maybe they took even stronger action recently, or they're just doubling down on that hardline stance.
So generally much tougher stance.
Yeah, more explicitly anti-Houthi. And then there's the whole question of, the U.S. military focus within Yemen itself. So since 2015, the U.S. has supported the Saudi-led Operation Restoring Hope.
Right.
But during Trump's his first term, from 2017 to 2020, most of their actions were targeting al-Qaeda and ISIS in Yemen.
Okay.
Not the Houthis. This direct confrontation we're seeing now, the U.S. military taking on the Houthis because of what they're doing in the Red Sea, that's pretty recent. It's really only ramped up in the last year and a half.
So it seems like Trump is taking a much more direct approach this time around.
For sure.
Compared to his first term. What do you think? What's behind this shift? What's his objective here?
Well, a lot of people are saying that these strikes, they're a warning A warning shot to Iran.
Mm.
It's a way for the U.S. to flex its muscles a little bit, show them they're serious about this
Yep.
and that they're not going to tolerate anyone messing with global trade.
But at the same time, they don't want to start a war, right?
Right. They're trying to walk this very fine line, project power without triggering a full-blown conflict with Iran.
A very delicate balancing act.
It is.
So you're saying it's a show of strength, but also a way to maybe set the stage for some future negotiations.
Exactly. Trump's always been a big believer in projecting strength before you go to the negotiating table.
Right, right.
And maybe this is part of a long game, right? Laying the groundwork for talks with Iran, maybe even about their nuclear program. Who knows?
Well, for now, the official word from the White House is that they're doing this to protect those shipping lanes.
Yeah, that's their public justification. And it makes sense, right? It's a vital waterway.
Of course.
But I think there's more to it than that. It's about more than just keeping ships moving. It's about power dynamics in the region. It's about the U.S. asserting its role, in keeping things stable, however you need to define stable.
That's interesting. And speaking of regional dynamics, it's pretty remarkable how other countries in the area are reacting to this. I mean, the Indian Express is pointing out that a lot of Arab states, even Saudi Arabia, they seem to be distancing themselves from the U.S. here.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, what do you make of that?
Well, Riyadh in particular, they've apparently been advising restraint since January. They even refused to help with logistics for the U.S. strikes.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it suggests maybe they have different priorities, or maybe they think there's a better way to handle this situation. They might be worried about, things getting out of control. Or maybe they prefer to deal with it through their own channels. It's hard to say for sure.
It's definitely not a unified front.
Nope. And that raises some serious questions. I mean, if the U.S. doesn't even have the full support of its allies, how effective can this strategy really be in the long run?
That's a good point. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the Houthis themselves. I mean, these guys have been hit with thousands of airstrikes over the years, and they're still a force to be reckoned with.
Oh, yeah, they're survivors, that's for sure. Between 2015 and 2023, they took over 20,000 airstrikes from that Saudi-led coalition. I mean, most armies wouldn't even exist anymore after that kind of pounding.
That's insane. So how do they do it? How do they survive?
They're masters of what we call asymmetric warfare. They're not going to go toe-to-toe with a superior force in a traditional battle. They're smarter than that. They use hit-and-run tactics. They exploit their opponent's weaknesses. They know the terrain. It's classic David and Goliath stuff.
So they're basically adapting to the situation.
They are, and their use of technology is evolving too. Before 2015, they didn't even have missiles. They fought 6 wars against Yemen's government without them. But then, boom, they get into this missile and drone warfare like Hezbollah. They're learning fast. They're not afraid to change their tactics.
And despite all the strikes, they're still launching attacks.
Still operating. They're proving that they're not going down easy.
Which brings us back to Iran, right? Trump is saying that they're the ones pulling the strings. But, what's the reality there?
Well, there's no question that Iran is backing the Houthis. They're giving them money, weapons, and probably strategic guidance too. But according to the Indian Express, Tehran officially insists that Ansar Allah, the Houthi movement, is acting independently.
So it's a complicated relationship.
It is. They have shared interests, but the Houthis have their own motivations too, rooted in Yemen's internal conflicts and their own grievances. They're not just puppets. They have their own agenda.
And it's not just Iran, right? Other countries are involved too.
Yeah, indirectly at least. China, for example, they buy a lot of Iranian oil. That gives Tehran the cash they need to support the Houthis. And there are reports that Russia might be selling them weapons.
Oh, wow.
Intelligence, maybe even more advanced stuff. And a lot of those Houthi anti-ship missiles, they're based on old Chinese designs. It's a reminder that the arms trade is global and that technology has a way of sticking around.
So even with the U.S. strikes, it seems like the Houthis have a pretty strong support network.
They do, and that's why a lot of experts are saying that these strikes, while they might hurt the Houthis in the short term, they're not going to be a knockout punch.
Right.
As long as that support keeps flowing from Iran, China, and maybe others, the Houthis are going to be able to bounce back.
So what's the answer then? What needs to happen to really bring stability to the Red Sea?
That's the million-dollar question. It's going to take more than just bombs, that's for sure. It's going to require some serious diplomacy, some creative thinking, and probably some tough compromises from everyone involved.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up for our listeners, especially those of you who are focused on your UPSC prep. What are the key things to take away from all of this?
Okay, so first, you've got to understand that U.S. policy is in flux. They're taking a more aggressive approach now, but that could change, again, depending on who's in power. Second, the region is a tangled web of alliances and rivalries. They've got Arab states breaking with the U.S., which makes things even more unpredictable. Third, the Houthis are a tough nut to crack. They're resilient, adaptable, and they know how to fight an asymmetric war. And finally, external support is crucial. Iran's the main player, but China and Russia are in the mix too, and that makes it much harder to isolate the Houthis.
So much to unpack. This is definitely the kind of stuff that could show up in your mains exam.
Absolutely. Those questions about international relations, security challenges in West Asia, the whole global power game, it's all relevant.
And don't forget the prelims.
Right.
You need to know those timelines, those key players, those policy shifts. This is all crucial stuff for anyone trying to understand what's happening in the world today. So here's something to think about as you continue to study this issue. Given how tough the Houthis are, given their unconventional tactics and their powerful friends, what can actually be done to make the Red Sea a safer place? Is there a solution that doesn't just involve more violence?
It's a tough one.
It's a challenge, but it's a challenge worth thinking about.
Absolutely.
And if you found this deep dive helpful, be sure to like and subscribe for more in-depth analysis of important issues.
Yeah, we'll be back with more soon.
And if you have any questions, drop a comment below. We love hearing from you. Oh, and just a reminder that all of this information is based on reporting from the Indian Express.
Great source.
Okay, that's all for today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.